Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Everything Went Black podcast. Before we move on to our guest, Jason Hellmann, my good friend Jason Hellmann, just like to thank everyone for listening, and if you get a chance, give us a rating on iTunes. It's much appreciated. Another way that you can possibly support the podcast is by our Patreon campaign. And if you go to everythingwentblackmedia.com, you will see a pop-up, and that's a way for you to contribute to the general maintenance of the show every month. And in exchange, you will get a bunch of free content, which I've already posted, and I'm working on some new stuff. So those of you out there who are Patreon supporters, there's some new stuff coming down the line. The last couple months been very, very busy for me, working on the brand new Metal Matters podcast, which is going to be launched through Gimme Radio. And the debut episode is November 13th, so it's coming right up in a couple weeks. And I've been curiously absent from posting Necro and Everything Went Black episodes because I've been working on this for the last couple months. Got a bunch of content ready to go. That will be launched, like I said, on the 13th of November. And I'll let everyone know all the details. But apparently later this week, there'll be like a trailer and they'll start promoting it. So once that's underway, it'll free up my time. I'll be able to get back into doing more regular episodes of EWB and just kind of, keep everything rolling. So Jay Hellmann, friend of mine. We've been friends since like the 90s. I met Jay as a photographer back in the late 90s, and that was like a very, very special time in New England. That was when Hydrahead Records was happening. A lot of those bands like ISIS, Cave In, Botch, Cable, Piebald, they're just sort of coming into existence, coming into their own, and Hellmann was there to document a lot of that. And so in addition to his the important work he did with photography, we also get into some Jack London-esque stories of international travel and adventure. So we had a great time. It was always fun to see Jay, and enjoy. So last week, was it like 2 weeks ago, there was that big benefit out in LA for Caleb Schofield, the recently, the late bass player for Cave In, as well as Old Man Gloom and Zozobra, and a very someone who a lot of our friends and people in general has been held in high regard. And I don't really know Caleb that well, or I didn't know him that well. I met him briefly. I actually recorded his hardcore band before he was in Cave In.
Yeah.
And then my old band played with Cave In Canada, and I saw him there, and it was always very friendly, but I wasn't, we weren't like tight like I am with some people.
Right.
But there's been a series of benefits, and most recently the ISIS, a band that we're both friends with, reformed to do this one show.
Yeah. And
you were at the event.
That's right.
How was it seeing ISIS after all these years?
It was good. Those guys came together. They had kind of spoken about to get back together, to not get back together. In the live stream of that event, there's some interviews with Aaron Turner and whatnot, and they kind of discussed that. But I think that with Caleb's passing and just trying to memorialize his memory in a fitting way, they were trying to draw some attention to it and everything else, and it just apparently it felt like a very natural thing for them to do. So for why they got back together, it seems like a pretty significant reason, and man, it was really good. I spent a lot of time traveling with them with ISIS over the years, so it felt like everything, like they hadn't missed a beat. Like it just came right back together very naturally.
Yeah, I mean, was it a set comprising of material from their career, or was it like more weighted towards the later years, or they play any like old material?
Yeah, they played. It was more towards the late years, but they did play Celestial. Obviously, that was the name that they were billed under, Celestial. I think the ISIS moniker again has been kind of taken over. And then they played a couple songs from Panopticon and Oceanic. So it was short set. The night was not their night,
Right.
but they did justice to the night, to themselves, and to the memory of Caleb. So people came from far and wide again, both for Caleb and for the possibility of seeing ISIS get back together. So it was well received for sure.
And that was at the Wiltern Theater, which is like a fairly big room.
Yeah, it was really nice.
Yeah, I never actually been inside there. They don't,
Yeah,
no band that I would play in would ever be able to play in a place like that. So
yeah, exactly. No, it was good, man. It was a nice venue. I was pretty happy to have been there just to check it out. It's one of those names you kind of hear about all these bands as they start to get a little bigger. That's the type of venue they start playing. So, again, I'm on the opposite end of the country and I don't have much call to be there. So it's kind of cool to finally get to check that out.
So you and I first met back in the late 90s in Boston, Massachusetts, during what looking back, I think was like sort of a very important part of, extreme music or hardcore metal or whatever you want to call it. It was like that, I would say 95 to 2002, that framework right there is like in New England. There were some outlier bands from Seattle like Botch that comprised like this very interesting wave of bands that were operating within hardcore. And I feel like you were sort of on the periphery, but also you were this like fly on the wall photo documentarian of that entire thing as it happened. Because I remember seeing like, who's this weirdo with the cameras, like he on stage with a gigantic beard, and what's his deal?
Yeah, that's exactly the deal right there.
Yeah.
Just stay out of the way, stay away from anything. Don't pull any cords, don't knock any mics over. But no, I don't know. I just wanted to see bands doing their thing. I don't want to like interfere with that. Just really, like you said, fly on the wall, quiet, and just observe and get tons of pictures. Of course, they needed tons of pictures because there was a lot of duds in the mix there, but the digital photography was not what it is today. So I was still shooting film and doing a lot of experimenting with lighting and film speed and all this other stuff. So
and you never actually lived in Boston, did you? You always lived out here in Connecticut?
Yeah. So I lived in Connecticut, but then I spent a lot of time in Boston, and then eventually I ended up working with those guys at Hydrahead. So I was up there for a couple days a week, helping them out, doing any number of things, but that also gave me access to a lot of shows and whatnot. So it seemed, I think everybody believed that I lived there because I was there so much,
Yeah, I just assumed, because I saw you around all the time, that you lived somewhere in like Mission Hill or in that area in Boston.
Yeah, I was kind of camping out with Turner for a bit when I was staying up there, and that was the hot spot.
Yeah, I think it's like, looking back on that whole time frame, like I said earlier, it was like a really important part of New England's musical sort of, even though, the Hydrahead, none of those people are actually from Boston, and ultimately the label moved out west, but there was like that sweet spot of those few years where something really cool like happened. And how'd you meet those guys? Just from being around, or?
Well, there's this guy you might know by the name of Randy.
Oh yeah, Randy Larson, my good friend.
That guy.
Yeah.
So Randy and Cable are from Connecticut, so I was doing a lot of work with them, and I'm friendly with Randy's wife and everything else. I've known her since like grade school, so it was just a lot of overlap with that. And eventually, Cable came to the attention of Aaron and Hydrahead, and through that, I was supplying photos and some layouts and all this other kind of stuff. And then one thing led to another, and it was, do you have pictures for this? Do you have pictures for that? And so it came together pretty quickly, pretty organically. And it was, some Jesuit stuff, some cave-in stuff, I think trailed into some Botch stuff. I mean, the chronology is kind of all over the place, but as the release schedule for Hydrahead was all over the place. They kind of mirrored each other, but so that's I believe it started with just kind of working with Randy and seeing him at shows and everything in Connecticut, which pushes the timeline back years before all the Hydrahead involvement.
Were you around for the Trash American Style? Do you know Malcolm and those guys?
Oh,
yeah. Yeah, did you get a chance to go to the Anthrax Club?
That I never got down there. I was going to shows at that time,
right?
But for some reason, I never ended up down there, which is really a tragedy. A huge misstep on my part. But I was probably working or some nonsense. So
yeah, I feel like there could be a whole documentary just dedicated to the Anthrax Club.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sort of it changed locations a couple of times, and it was in that that alleyway between Boston and New York City at a very, once again, a very crucial time in the late 80s, So there was all these bands that would play New York and Boston, and they always play at the Anthrax Club, and you would see, there is a book about it, about the venue, and there's a list of all the shows that happened there.
Yeah.
And you'd be surprised at some of the bands that play there.
Well, exactly. It wasn't just one singular thing. It was a whole variety of bands, which, always makes for some crazy shows.
Yeah.
Like you want to have that mix of bands playing. I don't want to see the same, format 4 times in a row or whatever it is. So, yeah, the Anthrax had a hell of a lot of stuff going on down there.
Yeah, and there was always a couple of Connecticut bands, like this band Seizure, I remember, I think they're called Seizure, which is... they seem to be opening like all the shows that I went to there. They're like a local band.
Yeah.
I think so. Maybe I'm hallucinating this whole thing. But I remember seeing a band called Seizure play a bunch of shows at the Anthrax Club. But yeah, the Melvins played there apparently.
Yep.
The Rollins band played there about 200 times apparently. Because I remember looking at like this list of shows, and it was like, okay, Rollins band, September 12th. Rollins band, October 23rd. Just... Every month they seem to be like rolling through Connecticut for some reason.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was very active out this way at that time period.
So did you have you were a regular contributor at Hydrahead, like, I hate to say job or position or whatever, but you served a function within that, sort of coalition of people that work there, you and Mark, and was it primarily photo related, or did you do a little bit of everything there?
A little bit of everything. I mean, Aaron was doing all the art related stuff and, dealing with bands and whatnot. Mark was doing a lot of band related stuff and some business oriented stuff. I mean, they shared a massive amount of responsibilities, but just for general purposes. So anything that fell through the cracks that I could handle creatively to take some of the burden off of Aaron, I would jump in and pick up some of his layouts and, alter those for posters or stickers or patches or whatever it was, just trying to help. I was doing photography, and, you could see throughout that Hydrahead catalog, there's a lot of stuff that got used in there, which is, really fun for me. I mean, it just, again, it happened very organically where, Aaron would be working on something. It's like, oh, I got something that would work there. And so it worked out. Job is a bit of an odd statement. Just, I did work there for a while and helped. Like I said, I think help is the better term. I did work there, but I also was only there part-time. So I was doing a lot of stuff at home. I was working my own, design stuff, programming and whatnot, and paying bills, doing that stuff, but really enjoying myself working with the Hydrahead guys.
Yeah, and I mean, none of the stuff that we do is more like, career, job. It's like a sort of spiritual vocation, I guess, this path, as opposed to, all right, I'm punching in and I'm going to go and work in this salt mine for like 8 hours a day and then punch out and go home and do something else. Like these things, like these creative endeavors don't really fit in that box that people will construct around like a job, you know what I mean? Because you're constantly thinking about these things,
Oh yeah, it's one of those things where it's kind of the calling, You don't know why, but you're just compelled to kind of pursue this stuff. I think there's a fair amount of that independence and just the freedom to actually be creative. Like I've been in some environments where there's some creative work, and when you're forced into doing it, it doesn't feel nearly as creative.
What compelled you to get into photography?
That's another one of those oddball things. It just, there was no specific, like, I saw this one thing and I need to do this. It just happened. Some friends of mine would play shows locally in the Connecticut area, and I was going to shows and really dug in. I was, thought that they were doing some good stuff, and just started taking a couple pictures here and there. And then people were talking about, oh, that was this show because we saw the pictures, and it just, I just dug in with it and kept taking pictures and got better equipment, and then ultimately started adding, flash and all this other stuff. So it just, it was a large outlay for equipment for a young kid. I mean, at the time I was probably like, it was before I had my driver's license.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you're talking like 14, 15, this kind of stuff. But then as I started getting, some jobs after I got my license and everything else, I had a little bit of a budget where I could, kind of put some cash into the effort. So, and then of course, it was all film. So you had to buy film and develop film, and all that business started adding up. So yeah, it was one thing after another, and you get a couple of good pictures out of a couple of rolls, and you're like, oh, good, I'll try this next time. So it became another kind of creative outlet where you're experimenting with things and lighting and everything else. I mean, it's not like I went to school for that. I spent a lot of time and money with film and going to shows and everything else.
So you never actually got any kind of like formal, training or anything in photography?
No.
Wow,
no.
That's impressive, man. But then again, I think about everyone I know that does stuff like anything, like be it, video editing or design or, photography or any of these fields. And I hardly know anyone who actually has a formal background in any of these things. I think Turner might be one of the only people I know that actually has like an art background.
Right.
You know what I mean? Instead of just like doing stuff like off the cuff, like most people I know.
Yeah. Yeah. You spend a lot of time with the things that you're kind of fascinated by, and you dig in on it, and you're teaching yourself things. You're teaching yourself what not to do and then how to improve on that. I mean, you can afford to do that when you're younger, and you have a little bit in. It's not like now all the equipment for everything is so expensive, but you have to have all this gear. So people spend a lot of time and money trying to get the best gear, and then they kind of lost the plot a little bit, I think. Years ago, like I said, black and white film was cheap, so I was buying that in bulk and rolling my own film and shoot, and then I had a darkroom at my house for that. So I just, like I said, I spent a lot of time just doing that and feeling it out, and it got to the point where it came pretty naturally. Those venues were poorly lit and everything else, so you just kind of work with what you have, and you have a lot of latitude with creativity for small bands like that. It's not like I was doing Van Halen, artwork or anything, which
where they would tell you what they wanted.
Yeah. I think that the business of music would dictate that we need a brighter shot or a crisper shot or something like that. But you could have some motion blur, you could have some light trails and things like this, and it was fun and interesting. And so
yeah, I mean, that became, when I think of that work from that period of time, that's sort of the aesthetic of what you were doing. Because I just remember when I started seeing, because I didn't really get to know you until a little bit later, but I was aware of you, and I think we sort of knew each other a little bit. But I remember seeing your photos a lot, and I'd be like, wow, this looks like that guy's photos that, it's got this like cool aesthetic to it. And it's like, back then, obviously, people were just shooting from the hip and doing whatever. Like if you were a writer, you also shot photos for whatever zine you were working with. And, but so when I saw work that I thought that was like, real creative and interesting and actually captured something as opposed to just like, a static photo of like some dude playing guitar or something like that. I definitely noticed it. Now, one of the things like I always, being peripherally involved in creative things, like, when you shoot, do you capture or do you actually visualize what the shot is supposed to look like? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think for me, it's pretty reactionary. I mean, it's not like I'm out there with a shot list of things that I need to capture for a specific publication. So basically, I'm watching a band and just kind of seeing how they interact with each other, with the crowd, or and just follow that along and try to predict maybe where something is going to. Maybe I can capture this moment if it happens again or something like that. But I spend a lot of time just, looking through the lens, trying to frame things up and capture them as they kind of unfold. I mean, when you get to see the same band time and time again, you get a feel for what's going on and you might be able to expect from that. But the lighting changes, the songs change. So, there's a number of those factors that kind of like pile up, and you may be able to replicate things, and then again, you might not.
One of the one of the questions every year I ponder this as to like why a book hasn't come out with your work in it, especially since like, it's not like you're shooting bands that no one's heard of, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, you got Cave In, you got ISIS, you got pretty much the entire Hydrahead catalog, I'm sure other, Neurosis,
Yep.
So what's up? Why is there no tome of black and white photographs that I can have?
That's twofold. The largest reason is the person you're looking at right now. Yeah, that's something that I've wanted to do for a long time, and I talk about it and I think about it, but when I start acting on it, I always get distracted. I have a pretty long work day, which is a big drag. Not the best excuse, but it's a little bit of a deterrent. I do have a lot of pictures from more recent times. Probably the bigger, more debilitating thing that has happened in history is that I lost about 15 years worth of photographs in 98, 99.
Oh, man.
So I went away on a trip, and I came back and a pipe had burst in my darkroom, and I lost basically everything. Some of like the best Neurosis pictures I've ever gotten are completely gone for all time. So that was really upsetting. And it's a time where I had actually started with a big stack of black and white prints, and a lot of stuff kind of just went by the wayside. A lot of negatives, I should say, went by the wayside with that. And the best part of that is the only thing that got ruined when the pipe burst was that book of negatives. Nothing else in the darkroom was damaged.
Wow.
So it's something that, it's always in the back of my mind. I need to actually get a little more active on it. I'm active on so many other things, and the photo book just keeps getting put off.
Yeah, man, because I think that, the longer the time goes passes, I think that period that we just discussed is like going to be looked back on as, a very significant epoch in, whatever, punk, hardcore, metal, whatever you want to call it, like that. It's something that especially since like a lot of the participants in that scene have moved on to do, really important things, like great things,
Yeah, well, I think, like you said, none of those guys from Hydrahead or a lot of the bands were even from Boston, but it just worked out that way. It's like there was some lightning in a bottle for those couple of years where everything came together just so. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that that's something that could have been forced. You can't put those same variables in place and have the same outcome. It just so happened that way. So yeah.
Yeah, because like I can even visualize like the whole book. There'd be like some text, some writing, there'd be a bunch of photos, some sort of chronology, all black and white. It would be a really handsome volume 1 and volume 2.
I like where you're going with this.
Yeah, man. I don't know. I see it, and I'm not trying to be like, for some like, fucking pedestrian, like financial gain or whatever, but just to have for people. I know these things cost money, but also it's like something that like, I think it'd be just really cool to have that.
Oh, I can't tell you like the amount of pictures that have been seen versus the amount of pictures that have been taken. Again, it sounds a little weird, but I have got just volumes of photos just sitting there.
These outtakes, stuff that you can use.
Yeah. I mean, you can only use so many pictures of the same band for any given publication or record or what have you, but there's a lot of good stuff out there. I get the business from Nate once in a while. He's like, we actually talked about it a few years back, and he was like, I'll interview people, whatever it's going to take, let's get this done. So maybe I should talk to him again.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Light a fire under me.
Yeah. And it's like, there's all these different like publications now. There's like, Bazillion Points. They put out all sorts of music related stuff. Like they collected that Metallion, that black metal zine,
Yeah.
It's in like just one big volume. They have like that Tom Warrior, Only Death is Real, like book. And it's a lot of that's photos too. I think something like this would fit because you got, like I said, you got bands like that people care about, Converge, Cave In, ISIS, but some of the other, like Botch, Drowning Man, Cable, I'm sure there's like Old Man Gloom photos and things like that, and whatever, just like, and even just like have a photo of Aaron's hallway with those, the paintings that he had in his hallways, those like with the devils from the Bloodlet record, like that shit's gone. Like no one, that's lost, like only, like because you've been to the house a bunch of times and you get accustomed to it and you're like, oh yeah, man, that's that kid he's got the crazy hallway. It's sort of red with these devils in it.
Right.
But a lot of people haven't even seen that. They don't even know about it. You know what I mean? It would just be, I just think now, especially since a lot of those guys, like people really follow them, it'd be cool to like, be like, oh yeah, I have all this guy's records and this is kind of like where a lot of this stuff kind of germinated. And this is like, the alpha point of this whole thing. And there's like this crazy mural on this hallway. Just stuff like that. I always go back to that mural, man, because I just thought that was the coolest thing.
Well, I think that just, that is how a lot of these people in this music scene kind of like get into stuff because it's not high profile. There is not a lot of press on things. So you find something that's interesting and you kind of follow up on it and you really dig in. And I think that's, any little stone that you could turn over and find some new information or some new insight is always welcome.
So recently, well, for me, I've just learned about this about you, is that you've been on this Jack London-esque travel / expedition kick. Like, and apparently your life has been in danger on a number of occasions.
So yeah, I've been traveling probably since about '98, and just doing different stuff. I did a lot in the U.S. And then eventually around 2004, 2005, I started traveling overseas, Europe, dabbled in, I went to Egypt early, what was that? Probably about 2006 or so. But then, hit Australia and whatnot. So I've been making the rounds. I just have different groups of people that I travel with. So there's kind of been phases over those years of different spots. But I mean, again, to go back to the music stuff, like those pictures that were on those Old Man Gloom records, Meditations 2 and 3, are from that Arizona-Utah trip.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, actually, that's Meditations was prior to that, and then Seminars 2 and 3 were the
the way they fit together
back,
into like the back, the mural
thing,
sort of thing. Wow. Yeah. So it's come to my attention that you were in danger at some point. What happened?
Yeah.
Like someone tried to stab you with a knife or something, or what's
so.
going on? Like it's travel. I hear about your crazy travel experiences.
All right. There's a couple different things that are. I guess the biggest one is we unwittingly began what became known as the Axis of Evil tour, which started actually. Now was the time. Now
really?
Was the anniversary, yeah.
Around Halloween?
7-year anniversary. So in October of 2011, my buddies Chris and Parker and myself went to Russia, and then from Russia we went to Iran. And in Iran, we had planned, 12, 14 days of driving around and looking at stuff. And it didn't really turn out that way. It turned out with us spending about 9 days in jail.
Oh.
So, I kind of laugh about it now because it's been so long. But yeah, it was not a laughing matter. It was kind of intense. So we just basically got detained by some local police in the city of Shiraz, and then they did not like what they saw with us. I'm not sure, what the deal was, but they just had it out for us, seemingly.
Did they think you were like journalists or something like that?
Yeah, well, basically we were walking around the town and We saw this little sign on a wall. The first instance we had seen of, no pictures.
Okay,
So
wow.
my buddy sees the sign and feels compelled to take a picture of it, and that landed us in hot water. I mean, it was like a movie. Like instantly, people started filing out of this building, and not 2 or 3 people, probably like 6 or 7 people just came out and like kind of corralled us back into the building. It turned out that it was some kind of secret police outpost, which was a little bizarre.
Did they have like weapons on you, or?
No, they didn't point weapons at us, but there was no way we were getting away from them,
Right.
kind of thing. So
Yeah.
we were detained. So some locals were detained as well, but they kind of got out of it pretty quickly. A local cleric came in and kind of vouched for them, and they were in and out of there in like 45 minutes. In the meantime, we got kind of the third degree, and it was because we had a lot of camera gear. That's what set the tone for that. So, they took my 2 friends had some digital cameras at the time, and they had taken the police had taken the memory cards out of those and just started rifling through them and found all this stuff which they considered incriminating. We didn't know what we were taking pictures of. It's like, oh, there's a curb that's yellow and red, that's cool. And they were coming at us with a lot of stuff. I mean, we had like 13-hour interrogations.
Wow.
And all this kind of stuff. So just day after day. The weird thing was, I mean, to back this up, like if you asked me like, oh, I heard you went to Iran, how was it? I would say it was awesome. You should go and check it out. Now, after what I just told you, you think I'm out of my mind. Like, why would you say that? It was just a fluke thing. I kind of equate it as being like being in a car accident. Like, I'm not going to dismiss the whole country. Like, I think it was awesome. Like, seriously, it was probably one of the best places that we've been to. It's unfortunate that it turned out that way, but that's just, what that trip was.
Was there a way to possibly check in with some of these guys and let them know, like, all right, we're not journalists, is there, I mean, the language, did anyone speak English?
Yeah.
Okay.
They spoke English. Didn't care what we had to say. I mean, they came at us pretty hard with,
Okay.
Why do you have the beard of a Jew?
Oh,
how long have you worked for the CIA? So it's like.
So let me ask you a question now. Just the beard thing. Don't Muslims have don't those guys have beards?
Yeah, Iran is
It's
Persian. They're their own thing.
Okay.
So everybody was kind of giving us, not friction, but they were kind of like giving us a gentle ribbon. Like, what's with the beard, guys? Like, what are you, the American Hezbollah? So they,
But it is a Muslim country though, Iran, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But I'm saying a lot of those guys have beards.
Yeah. But
so
for us, they just, we stood out like a sore thumb. No
I'm
matter
sure
what
you
we
guys did.
We
Yeah.
changed our clothes. Like before we went there, we had a conversation about what we were not going to talk about. There was going to be no politics.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously. And we selected clothes that were very plain, nothing with any writing on it,
Right.
no crazy band shirts or anything like that. So just made, if you're going to do something like this, you want to be educated and take some precautions, not be completely reckless about it. So we did all that. It didn't matter. We stood out like crazy. Just a bunch of white dudes wandering around. So,
Because I would love to go to the Middle East, man. Like that's, especially Egypt. Like you mentioned, you went to Egypt.
Yep.
So what was the vibe like in Egypt? Was it as equally as like, did you end up getting thrown in jail there too? Or like, get guns drawn on you there? Or
the
what
Iran
happened?
thing was like a fluke. Like I said, it's unfortunate that it turned out that way, but like the Middle East is awesome. I think, so we've been to a bunch of these places because everybody says, you can't go there. It's crazy. You can't do this. You can't do that. No, I went and it was fine. Again, it turned out different than we expected. Prior to that, it was like the best trip I had been on. Egypt, super cool. Bad stuff has happened there, absolutely.
Well, yeah, for sure.
So, there was a group of German tourists got killed like a couple of years before I was there. It was, really heavy in that area, which is further south towards the border with Sudan. But
Were they just like collateral damage or,
I don't recall the exact details, but they were, brought off of a bus and later executed. So that was, obviously dark.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want to make light of that.
No, hell no.
But I also, we went and we made educated decisions and rolled the dice. You know, I wasn't waving a flag around and talking crazy politics or anything like this. You know, you just go and you observe, and that same mentality of just being kind of quiet. And I want to go to some place and I want to see how they exist. I don't want to go someplace and see how I live my life or how the 5-star resort, you know, in New York City is.
Sure.
I want to go and kind of peer in and see what's happening in these places. So I went to Egypt in December of 2006, and then I went back again in, that must have been mid 2013. And there was a lot of talk of what was going on with this Arab Spring activity, and there was still tanks on the street. And, you know, I had been to the museum in Cairo, and it was gorgeous. I mean, all that stuff that you see as a kid, you know, that stuff you would kind of see in National Geographic. Like, here's there. Tutankhamun's death mask, like, just gorgeous. And then all the riots happened. So, like, I want to know what happened to all that stuff. A lot of stuff got kind of damaged and ruined, but I didn't get a chance to go back there the second time I was there. But, you know, what do you do when you go to Cairo? You don't have much time, so you're going to do the big touristy things. I went back to the pyramids, and it was just as awesome.
I can imagine. You know, and just, you know, being Americans, our idea of age and scale, I mean, our country is like, you know, less than 300 years old.
Yeah.
Right. The oldest thing prior to this international travel is like, you know, can't be more than 250 years old that you've seen.
Yeah.
So, like, you go out to these places and this is like, you know, thousands of years old that, you know, reach back into a past that has like hardly any like reliable documentation besides from just like, you know, like the way history was documented. Obviously it's not written in English.
Right.
A lot of it's done in some, you know, a very, you know, occult sort of language.
Yeah. Still not understood.
Still not fully understood
right.
what the intentions are, you know, and it predates any kind of monotheistic religions too. It's all like, you know, the pagan roots of all these countries, you know.
Yeah, it's really a trip. So the first time I went, we'd stopped in Italy on the way to Egypt. So, you know, that was my first time there, and we're looking at the Colosseum and we're like, this is crazy. You know, we see a bridge that was built in 62 BC and you're like, wow, this is really awesome to get some perspective on it. And a day later, you're looking at the pyramids going like, no, that stuff in Italy is like brand new in comparison.
Yeah.
So it really is a trip. And that's why I tell people, like, you know, if you have any interest in the Middle East, if you have any interest in travel in general, like, go do it. There's no reason not to do that stuff. And it's there, it's real. You know, like, there's a lot of people trying to deny certain things have happened, you know, like, I don't even want to talk about Germany or anything like that, but like, that stuff happened. There's evidence of it. The pyramids are there. People want to talk about aliens or advanced life forms or whatever. That's a different trip. But like, just go and look at that structure. The architecture is there. It exists. There's paintings. You know, I saw all that stuff. I went to the Valley of the Kings. I went and saw, you know, all these different temples that are dotted all along the Nile, and it's just breathtaking. It's something that I think everybody should see. You know, if you have the time, the means, and the interest, then do it. I wouldn't be deterred by anything else.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big goal of mine, is to check that out. You know, just once again, just the idea that these are artifacts that really no one knows the origins of, really. I mean, if you think about the pyramids, there's like speculation as to where they came from.
Yeah.
You know, how they were built, still, what their function was. You know, there's different beliefs. And now it was John Wesley West. His last name is West. You know, an Egyptologist, I guess he just added a couple of tens of thousands of years to the age of the pyramids too.
Really?
Yeah. You know, based on like the Nile River Valley was like at one point like underwater or something like that.
Okay. So
it's crazy. And it's like one of those things that you read that, you know, it's like this fleeting thing that you just passes into your brain and then disappears, but you actually, without ever really considering the weight of something like that. You know, that there's this, because none of these buildings that we have now are going to last for, 50 years from now, if we just left like New York City, in 100 years, that place would be rubble, you know?
Well,
there'd be nothing left.
What happened to Grand Central Station and Penn Station? There's 2 buildings that have undergone like pretty serious renovations.
Yeah.
And way less than 200 years.
Sure. But I mean, if we just abandoned those areas, it would be, I mean, look at Detroit. You go to Detroit, they're the vacant parts of the city. In another 20, 30 years, they're going to be completely overgrown, and there's any traces of there being like any roadways. If you leave that stuff unchecked, is going to be gone. And then like in 200 years, it's going to be a forest. Yeah. So the fact that there's like these gigantic monoliths out there that came from wherever, whoever built them, is like a pretty heavy notion. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's definitely a lot to digest, and I think that's why it's crucial to you know, if you have the time and interest, go and see that, because looking at paper and having an interest is dwarfed by just standing there and looking at it. Or if you have the opportunity to go inside, it's a total trip. It's really worth it.
So there was this ice adventure that you went on too, and that one you almost lost your life in, didn't you?
I wouldn't say lost my life, but yeah, yeah, we spent a couple days in the cold. So that was, you know what, you're not going to believe this. This is also the anniversary of that trip as well. So that was in September into October of 2010. We went to Iceland and got waylaid by the snow drifts. So my buddy and I, Chris, who I went to Iran with, the two of us rented a Land Rover Defender and drove across the interior. We later discovered that most companies that do tours stopped doing tours in early September.
Oh, wow.
We did it in mid-October. But yeah, we made really good coverage. We went across almost the entire interior, and then we're so close to the end of it and just hit a snowdrift. Dug ourselves out, started making ground again, and hit another snowdrift. Dug ourselves out, repeated the whole process. And then got stuck a third time, and the third time we were in about 4.5 feet of snow. So none of the wheels were actually on the ground. Every time you start digging some of the snow out, the truck itself, the weight of the truck, you know, just comes down. So we ended up calling Iceland Search and Rescue, which just so happened to have, from a little sign I had taken a picture of, probably 50 miles back.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it was a little nerve-wracking, but then we had, since we had the number, we made a call, we were able to deal with that. They knew exactly where we were, so one thing led to another, and it was fine. That was interesting. Iceland's awesome. I can't say enough good things about that. That was, you know, before like this big rush of tourism kind of happened there. There was people going there, but it's really taken off over the last few years. But I've been there a lot, actually, so...
I've only been to the airport.
Dude, get out of the airport.
I want to go.
Get out of the airport.
I need to. It was most recently my last trip to England, or not to England, to Europe, France, specifically France. Mm-hmm. We had a layover. We flew an Icelandic airline called WOW Air. Mm-hmm. I don't know if we've spoken about the...
Oh, I'm aware of WOW.
Have you flown with them before?
I have.
And it's not very good, right? Your experience with them?
They are having a bit of trouble. I don't know if they still have their doors open at the moment, so I think that might tell you everything you need to know.
It was like, you know, we were flying there to do Hellfest, and you know, we had an advance, we had a deposit from you know, the people that put the festival on, and we had to buy like tickets and all this other stuff. Okay. So I went, yeah, obviously who's the cheapest, who we can afford, right?
Right.
So we can afford WOW Air, and there was a reason why they were so affordable.
Yeah. You could afford the ticket, but then once you show up, you pay for every other single thing.
You get jacked for like, you know, your every bag, I could like, they caught me by surprise in the morning because I was just dozing and I woke up, and this nice lady walked by and she's like, "Can I get you a cup of coffee?" And I was like, "Of course." It was like $4 or something like that for like...
Not would you like to buy a coffee?
Yeah.
Can I get you a coffee?
I'm like, I'm on a plane. They usually give you something for free, like water or coffee. And I was like, man. And then it was just like $3.50 for like instant coffee, basically.
Yeah.
But the other thing too is in some ways, WOW Air doesn't even really exist. Like in the sense that when you show up at the airport, we flew out of JFK. Mm-hmm. We're like, where's WOW Air? Like, I'd never even heard of this place, right?
Right.
You know, the guy and the driver knew where we were going, and the Uber guy or whatever. And, oh no, actually it was a car service, like one of these like park and ride services where you drop off your vehicle and they drive you in like a Sprinter, and they knew where it was. And I'm like looking around for the sign, and there's no Wow Air sign to be seen. And then this like one, I forgot what airline it was, their sign changed to Wow Air. So they dragged all their gear over, you know, that little thing that you put to see if it fits in the overhead compartment, like that rig. And suddenly it's Wow Air. And they're just like these like nomadic, you know, kind of, you know, nomads. You know, it's weird. It's like they don't really exist in some ways.
Well, again, it's like the odd thing of airlines to operate that way. It's like you want cheap air, but those are where the cuts are made to make that happen. So it's like, it's great when you're buying the ticket, but then when you get all those surprise upcharges, it's very disappointing.
In the long run, it actually was way more expensive.
Yeah.
You know, it was the old bait and switch. You know, it's like, okay. You know, and part of me was, you know, I've done this a couple times in my lifetime.
Yeah.
You know? So I'm like, all right, let me get information. Like, what are the charges? And they're very vague about all that stuff. Mm-hmm. When you try to find out, okay, how much they charge per bag, it really is kind of up to, it's such a crapshoot. You know what I mean?
I do. I know exactly.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Dude, we had the same exact experience because the last time I went to Iceland, we flew WOW, and then later looked at Iceland Air was sold out. That's how I ended up at WOW. Yeah. So it was the only option at the time, but it would have been cheaper to go with Iceland Air.
Yeah, I think I'm going to shun WOW Air if they're still around. And the seats felt like they were like maybe 2.5 inches smaller than all the other airlines. There was no no leg room. You know, it felt like I was riding a bus to France basically. And you know, there's a layover in Iceland, and everything was late. Everything. We were like an hour late getting in the air. And the whole time we're flying, I'm like, we're gonna miss our connecting flight. Right. And I'm like, we made it by minutes. But you don't need to live like that, man. You know what I mean? Exactly. And it's like, and no, these people don't understand that. It's like, if I miss this flight, I don't get there. It means I don't get to play in front of like, I don't get to do this whole thing. The whole reason why I'm flying there doesn't happen. I don't just like hang out in the hotel and like, oh yeah, man, you know, I'll get the complimentary this and that, and then like, you know, hang out and go to the bar or whatever. That's not why I'm going to France. I'm going to France for a reason. Right. And I expect my hard-earned dollars to put me at the right place and the right time.
We think you're buying some professionalism.
Yeah. But I got a little intense there for a second. But, you know, anyway, anyone planning international travel, man, be aware, be advised about WOW Air. That was a public service announcement. So any more plans in the future for travel? Anything immediate? It's the time of year apparently for you to go somewhere.
Yeah, I actually just got back. So.
Oh, okay.
So I had a quick 1, 2, 3 run. I was in Florida for some family stuff. Surprised my father for his birthday.
Oh, that was nice.
So that was nice. And then I came back and went to Mozambique in South Africa for a couple of weeks. And then I came back from that. I was back for a day or two, and then I went out to LA for the Caleb Schofield benefit show. So I just wrapped up. I think I'm going to be staying put for a little bit, but you know how every trip is, man. Like, you don't even get into the trip, and you're talking about where is the next place you can get to. Yeah. Where are you going to check out? It's like buying records. As soon as you buy one, you're like, I got to buy this other record now. You know, like one thing leads to another. It fills your head with the possibilities.
When you were in Iceland, was there any, like when you were locked in this like icebound tomb, was there any idea that you might not make it out?
Well, I think there was initial concern,
okay,
just due to the fact that the truck was so stuck that we would suddenly be responsible for this massive bill of, you know, kind of extricating a huge, heavy off-road vehicle out of, you know, what was essentially the start of winter.
Oh, wow.
So that was the bigger concern. We had been camping the whole time anyway, so we had a bunch of warm clothes, we had a bunch of water, a bunch of food, stove, we had like anything you could possibly need. We just weren't mobile, and that was the big concern. So again, we did what some people might consider foolish. We considered a little bit of adventure, and we're prepared as we could be. aside from having, you know, larger shovels and Popeye arms or something to dig out. But no, it was fine. There's always a little bit of concern, but like, look, we broke down in Zambia. We broke a defender there, and we jumped out of the truck. And before there was any time to really get concerned about stuff, everybody just kind of falls into a role. One guy's getting out tools. One guy's getting out the sat phone. Somebody else is getting out the safety triangles. You know, and everybody just kind of leaps into action. And you do these things, and you get out of it. We limped the truck in Zambia back to some guy's place and ended up having a whole other story to tell from it. If you ever see this Long Road Down show with Ewan McGregor, kind of drives around with his buddy on their motorcycles, and we bumped into Joseph McGregor Brooks, who's a big crocodile wrangler out in Zambia.
Crocodile wrangler.
Yeah, he previously he was an elephant and wildlife control guy in Africa. Wow. I'm talking about like in the mid-40s.
Yeah.
Like serious guy that we just stumbled upon. So like, you know, it was upsetting that we got waylaid with this broken truck, but then you find these other things that are just like, we would never have bumped into this guy. And it's like, we still talk about him. Unfortunately, since he's passed, but just like some crazy character that's, you know, a Scottish guy that ended up in the middle of Africa in like the 40s, 50s and just stayed there. So there's always a kind of a moment of that. You know, we've had trucks run out of fuel, other mechanical stuff go wrong, battery won't start. And I mean, you're like not in the Walmart parking lot, you know, you're like really
you're in
the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
So when we went to Botswana, we had a truck that just kept shorting out. Every time we'd try to unlock the truck, it would short out. It turned out that there was some wire that was hanging.
Oh,
and
wow.
It was just, you know, completing a circuit, and then that would arc the truck and it would short itself out. So we ended up doing a little bit of repair work on the fly and you know, pulled stuff apart, got it back to where it needed to be. But there was the first like 3 days or so, we just kept getting stuck. So that was a whole other thing. But you know, the more you travel, the more you tour, the more you figure things out, and you're a little more prepared for the next time. So it's nobody was bleeding. There was no like serious injuries, nothing like that.
No
so
bears or anything attacking you.
With that, no.
Yeah, because you know, this sounds like the beginning of a number of different horror movies that I've seen in my lifetime.
Well,
you know what I mean?
We've had our fair share of animal encounters, and that's for the better. We haven't had any lions in tents or anything like that, but we've had some stuff stolen by hyenas and fox and things like this. They're around, you know. Hippos have been just recently in Mozambique, we had hippos come through our camp in the night, which is, you know, they don't mess around. Hippos are the biggest cause for concern in Africa.
One time when we were recording in upstate, like way upstate New York, this place is a town called Saugerties. Mm-hmm. We recorded an EP up there called All Empires Fall, and it was on the studio was awesome. It was like very reasonably priced, had top of the line gear, incredible room, and it was on a farm.
Okay.
Right, and there were cabins for everyone to stay in, and not a lot of people obviously record there because it's like in the middle of nowhere, but we were able to go up there and do a few days, and there was these goats there, and I get up early in the morning. I had coffee. I was sitting on the porch, and like there was like one leader goat, and then the other goats followed him, and all four of them came up on the porch, and they're like making eye contact with me. You know what I mean? And I'm just like, he's like asserting that this is my shit right here.
He didn't get to that place just accidentally.
Yeah, man. Like, he's like, you're in my spot. You're in my area. I just want to let you know who's boss.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
Yeah. And it's like unusual. I mean, you know, there's a cat here, obviously. I have a cat. And we interact with these types of animals. But when you interact with a wild, undomesticated animal, that's a completely different story, man.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I feel a little braggy, but we went to Uganda, and in Uganda you can see mountain gorillas and you could see chimpanzees. So we were like, we have to go do this, and we walked through the forest to see the mountain gorillas. Luckily we didn't have to go too far. We found them, and we spent a little time with them. They're very, very protective of the gorillas. So there was only 3 of us.
I'm sure they're
in this
endangered,
group.
probably.
Oh,
you know?
yeah,
Of course. Yeah.
There's basically kind of armed guys around at all times with them, and so we were standing there and taking some pictures and really just soaking it all in. And one of the female gorillas turned her head and just looked at me and gave me this look, like she just kind of like flared her nostrils, and I stopped dead in my tracks. That was probably the most scared I've been. And we're talking about like 25 feet away, which sounds like a good distance, but gorillas will kind of cover that pretty quickly.
Yeah, they can close that distance pretty quick. Yeah, I imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's a couple of babies around, and they're all playful and doing their thing, and I'm thinking, I don't want to be between the mother and the baby, so I'm looking around to make sure that there's nothing going on. But I was kind of paralyzed there for a minute, and I'm hoping that anybody else could kind of see what's going on. It's just pretty startling because it's not your environment. It's like people freak out when they're in the water with fish and stuff like that. So I think it's similar. You're just like out of your environment. Yeah, you know what to do when a cat approaches you, or maybe a dog or something like that. You have a much kind of better idea of what takes place in
there's a
that
rapport
context
between the human and that type of animal.
Yeah.
And gorillas being very close to us genetically, and all of the darkness that's in the human spirit is in that gorilla too. That like on a different sort of instinctual level, they're not reasoning the way we are. There's like a very, I mean, from what I've read about gorillas and primates in general, there's like, a hierarchy of decision making that goes down.
Yeah.
You're you're here, you're doing this is what I do as a response to that. If you're, and of course, for, evolutionary purposes, you protect the young. If there's some weird bald ape there, with no hair between you and your young, that it's history for that guy.
Yeah.
Just there's nothing personal, guy, but you gotta go.
Yeah, these are the rules here.
These are the rules.
And that was kind of the thing. It's like you start thinking immediately like, don't show your teeth, don't make eye contact. Like you're looking and you want to see this. This is what you came here for.
Yeah.
But as soon as we locked eyes, I wanted to break it off, but I didn't. It's like the ocean. You don't want to turn your back on the ocean,
Sure,
So
yeah.
I just kind of tilted my head down a little bit and just try to see in my peripheral vision. I could see what's going on, but it was very tense. And then you just think, is this going to come back a minute from now, 5 minutes from now? Because you only have so long with them. So it is like a very like mind expanding kind of thing to be in that space, and then to have some kind of experience like that where it's just, you don't read that in the books, you know what I mean? Like you just have to be their first person to kind of like soak that in. Yeah,
primates are so interesting, man. Chimps, because like chimps are, I guess, are the closest to humans.
Yeah.
And they lie and deceive and all these things, just like people,
Yeah.
Wow. That's an experience, man.
It's a good one. Again, I talk to people all the time. If you want to go to Africa, let me know. I've been there a few times. I got some pointers and everything else, and nobody seems interested to go to Africa. I think there's just too much concern about bad stuff is happening.
What about, you're still vegan, right?
Yeah.
Now, how did that work in Africa? Like being vegan, like was there hard to find something to eat there?
No, I mean, look, there's all different parts of Africa, and there's all different parts of civilization, like built up structure, let's say.
Okay.
So there is some stuff, I can go and I could still get pasta. I can go and I can get Indian food. But a lot of these times, these trips we're out there camping, so I'm bringing my own food, so it's not even an issue to start off with.
Yeah.
So like when we go to Johannesburg, there's a couple of nice Indian restaurants that we like to go to. We'll dig in there, find some stuff. I found a few other places that are, vegan specific, and I'll try to jump over there and just experiment with what other places have going on. I mean, I'm in New York every day, so you have a lot of options
tons
there.
Of options there, yeah.
So when I go to these other places, I want to see what's going on. I want to kind of check things out. And again, just got back from Mozambique, and they had a local dish. What was it? Matapa, I believe it's called, which was cassava leaves, almond milk, rice, just a couple different things going on, and it was fine. I just checked out this little local place and dug in. It was good. So it's nice to have some options, you know, like I think there's other parts of the world that don't have the protein is not as crucial.
Yeah.
It's not as maybe prevalent, you know, like in Asia and Africa. It's still possible to get beef, this, that, or the other thing, or chicken, this, that, or the other thing. But the not having meat as the primary basis of the meal is not unheard of. It's not uncommon. It's not, you know, looked upon as crazy.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I mean, as far as like the human diet goes, like saturated fat is actually more of a crucial nutrient than, I mean, protein obviously, but you can get that from plant-based stuff like kale and broccoli and all this other stuff. But the saturated fat content apparently is like really what makes us run better as like hunter-gatherers. So, you know, if you think about when we were wandering out on the savannas, we might go days without eating at all. And surely days without eating meat.
Right.
But our sort of hominid metabolism was able to like metabolize things like nuts and the fats from nuts and everything and roots and things like that more so than, but you know, there's occasionally, you know, you take down like some animal and then you would have enough food for the tribe for like a week or whatever, but then you might go 2 weeks without any meat, you know?
Right.
So there's like a lot of variance in like the human diet apparently. So how you've been a vegan your whole life, right? For the most part, like, you know, your adult life, I guess.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, my adult life. So tail end of high school I started. So we're coming up on 27 years vegan. And
Interesting. I tried that once. I tried it when I probably wasn't doing it the right way. I mean, but it just didn't work for me physically. But I mean, most of my meals actually I have like one meal that's mostly vegetarian for the most part.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's one of those kind of unusual things where everybody in like their high school years or college years, they're like kind of try it out. It's some new different thing and people try it. And I think that they shut everything off one day and have no plan in place. And it ends up with like, you know, I tried tofu and it was cold and slimy. And it's like, well, of course, nobody wants to eat that. So like if you put some thought into it, there's ways to do it. And I think, you know, since I started to now, I feel like it's just so easy now. It's kind of mind numbing that people still make such a big deal out of it. You can go to the corner store and get some, you know, soy milk or coconut milk or almond milk or what have you. The ice cream stuff seems to be pretty prevalent. Again, I'm in New York, so I've got access to stuff there. But
yeah, I mean, you go anywhere there,
is all over the place. So now, if you go to some more remote parts of the U.S., I'm sure it'll be a little more difficult. But you know, with the travel that I've been doing, I've just been seeing things more and more. Just having options, you know, like eating more ethnic food, Asian food, Indian food. There's a lot of stuff there that just, you know, right from the start does not have the meat basis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It leaves a lot of stuff out that normally would be an issue. So it's, like I said, I think it's becoming far more common.
Have you, or do you have any desire to try that Impossible Burger that I've been reading about? Have you read about that?
You know what? I had one coincidentally maybe a week ago. Same thing. I'd been seeing it and hearing about it, the Impossible Burger, the Beyond Burger. And I don't know. I don't feel like I need to eat a burger to replace a burger. I need it to be more authentic. I get the point of it. Like, because most vegan burgers are not necessarily good. It's a patty form. So like that as the format, the basis of a sandwich, I understand that. But yeah, I had one recently and it was good. It was fine. I don't want to like make a habit out of having.
Well, it's like kind of junk foody, right?
Yeah,
Like, what are the ingredients? Like, I'm just out of curiosity. Is it like?
You know, I'm not even clear.
I mean, is it filled with like colors and flavors and all this other stuff?
I think it's a little better than that from what I gather. But you know, I didn't sit down and do a real dig in on it because it wasn't something that was really at the front for me that I really need to get in and try. You know, like I said, there's a couple places that do the burger format where it's more of a patty than necessarily a burger, and they use a variety of things. That, you know, you've got Some places are using beets, some other places are using like potatoes and mushrooms and stuff like that, and it's way better than it sounds.
No, it's actually the thing I was going to add to this, by being a meat eater, carnivore, omnivore, I would rather eat something that has less ingredients, that tastes not like meat. You know what I mean? Like if there's something that just had like lentils, rice, and like some seasonings, I'm down with that completely. Rather than this like thing that's supposed to like taste like beef that has like a gazillion different additives in it. You know what I mean?
And well, and isn't that always the test? Is like you give it to somebody who eats meat and they're like, okay, it's not awful, but I don't want to eat this. Like, if you want a burger, you want a burger. If you don't want a burger, then you have a number of possibilities. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
So, like, I understand why people are trying to to crack this to make a more convenient food for, any rest stop across the country. You can go into any one of those chain kind of restaurants and get something quick and know that it's a vegan option. So that I kind of understand why that exists. I don't think I'm going to have like a cookout and do a pile of burgers like that. And like I said, it's fine. I'll have them, but I'm not running around to do that because, like you said, it feels a little more like junk food. If I'm going to do something at home, then I've got, the space, whether it's cooking out on the grill or in the kitchen. You could roast some vegetables or something like that. I feel better eating that.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I know you should go without saying, but
yeah.
I just feel more involved in the entire process, so it feels more rewarding on a number of levels.
Yeah, I guess I'm on that camp too, where it's like, when I eat, obviously I like tasty food, but if it makes me feel bad, I'm not going to eat it. Like I'm more performance based. Like if I eat something that optimizes the way I feel, that's what I'm after. You know what I mean? Like I don't eat a lot. I try not to eat a lot of junk food, but yeah, it's just I'm not. Even stuff that has meat in it, if it's got too many things that I can't identify, I just totally turn it down. Like I don't go for it.
Yeah.
So, it's Halloween. You have any plans for Halloween or anything? Is this a big holiday for you? For me, it is. I love Halloween.
I know you do. I've been seeing that. I don't have much. Like I said, I just got back from a bunch of travel, so I'm trying to get back into the swing of things. Where I live, we don't get any trick-or-treaters. And I mean, I've been here for 10 years and I've gotten exactly 0 trick-or-treaters.
It looks like a haunted house out here, actually. It kind of does at night, you know. During the day, I'm sure nothing looks sinister during the day, really.
Yeah, this is true.
Yeah.
That should be the tell.
Yeah. But when I was driving up here, I'd only been here one other time.
Right.
When we shot those photos a few years ago.
That's right.
So I was like, I saw this dark passageway, right, leading back to where I couldn't quite see the house. And I was like, oh, I'm not going down there, man. That's probably something bad down there. So I'm not surprised you don't get trick-or-treaters out here.
That's fine. And I didn't select the house for the trick-or-treating abilities. But, I don't know what's going on. I haven't even done anything, like I said, because I've been away. So there's not even a single pumpkin or anything to be seen. And we're at, what?
We're closing in. Yeah. It's next week.
Yeah.
So, well, So anyway, thanks for, meeting up this fine evening.
Of course, man. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening out there. And we'll be talking to you guys soon.